Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Selectmen's meeting, brought to you via Zoom and in person. Let's see, the first item on the agenda is let's open the meeting at 6:34. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the regular meeting held on October 13th, 2020.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of October 13th, 2020. Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next item on the agenda is tax refunds from the tax collector. We have 5 refunds that need to be made for a total of $764.67. We can get a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion for the tax refunds, the amount of $764.67. Second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, next item on the agenda is report on the Deep River COVID-19 survey. You remember a few months ago, Kimberly McGrath volunteered to run a survey to see what impact COVID-19 might be having on our citizens, as well as to speak to what some thoughts as to how we might address those citizens. Kim has submitted that survey, and she's here tonight to share the results with us and to answer any questions. So I'm going to try. Oops, we have some waiting room people. Sorry. Admit and admit. And I'm going to try to make Kim the host so that she can share her report with us. And Kim, I think that's happening now.
Yes.
So I won't be able to see if anybody comes here. Don't get yourself too distracted because we are recording, so this will be on TV and stuff like that. So Kim, the floor is yours, as is the screen.
Thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Deep River. As Angus said, my name is Kimberly McGrath. I'm a research scientist. I recently retired from the University of Florida, and I'm a resident of Chester. And I was the person who crafted, if you will, a community survey to look at the impact of COVID-19. And we were, this is something that we did early in the summer in Chester. And I've had the opportunity to present to the community here. And I was quite honored that Deep River was also interested in this survey with regard to the citizens of your community. So as Angus said, I think the survey was open for approximately 3 weeks. We collected the data. I analyzed that data, and the report that you have before you is the results. So what I thought I would do this evening is walk through these results. It isn't so much the question or even the response categories and the tables. The thing that is really most important and what I intend to highlight this evening is the story that this data tells. And to have a conversation, there'll be an opportunity at the end for question and answers and some suggestions around possible next steps. So does anyone have any questions specifically related to me or the survey before we begin? All right. Well, hearing none, again, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to our conversation this evening. So the first thing that I want to point out is that the response rate, and this is really important to take into consideration, in thinking about these results. The response rate was 21%. And that is, in my opinion, a little on the low side. But having said that, that doesn't mean that you can't make inferences from the trends in the data and the responses from the community. So this was calculated based on 1,922 households in Deep River, and the number of households, because we didn't have it exactly, was identified through the Connecticut Data Collaborative. So 400 households responded. And this was very intentional. We wanted a household to reply, all of the family members to submit only one response. So this is reflective of not individuals in your community, but actually households in your community. And you'll notice that for each question, I also calculated the response rate. So of those 400 people, this is the percentage that responded to each of those questions. So you'll see when there were some writing questions or there were some skip questions, the response rate may have changed by each question, but in general, you had a higher response rate to each individual question than Chester actually did. And I attribute that to, we had fewer technical glitches, if you will, because we used a different survey platform for Deep River. So the first 5 questions are all demographic information, just so that we have an idea of the profile of the households that responded, and we know a little bit something about their risk based on the composition of those households, as well as the types of activities they did before the pandemic. So I'm thinking, for those of you who reside in Deep River, there may not be a lot of surprises in the first few questions here. So I've highlighted some things in the table just to draw your eye to that, because I'm not going to be reading. I'm going to be focusing in on very specific data related to each question. So if you look at, these are the number of people in the household. So almost 80% of the households that responded have either 2 members in their household or 3 to 4 members. So that combination represents, as I said, almost 80% of the households that replied to the survey. You can see here, again, more demographic information. We're asking about the age of the members of that family. So again, probably no surprises that you also have 80% of the households that replied are older than age 50 in your community. So the combination of 51 to 65 and older than 65. And these are, you know, somewhat similar. And then you have a group of 36 to 50 representing 28%. And then it's very similar as far as what I would consider to be young adults, whether 19 to 25 or 26 to 35, somewhere between 10 and 12%. And then school age, well, actually infants, toddlers, and preschool children, less than 10%. And then you have a fairly equal distribution across school age children. So once we know the profile of the households, now we're starting to ask questions about risk factors. So the first question was around responsibility for the care of an elderly relative or a member of your family that has a disability. And obviously, these are 2 more vulnerable or high-risk groups with regard to COVID, and that's why we're asking these next couple of questions. So in fact, almost 20% of households that replied to this survey do in fact have responsibility for the care of an elderly relative or someone with a disability. So important to think about that when we start to look at what they are telling us in regard to their willingness to participate in activities or their perceived risk or the safety precautions that they think you as a community or what would be important to them as a member of the Deep River community. So the other thing that is of interest around elderly relatives or family members with a disability is where do they live? So actually more than 50% reside in their own home. So that means that the household that's answering the survey has some responsibility for somebody else who lives separately who may or may not have in-home support. And then there's a very significant number that actually live in their household and a very small number for whom that elderly relative or person with a disability actually lives in a residential facility. There's some notes here. It mostly is related to how I analyze the data. And for the purposes of this meeting, I don't think I'm going to, in general, comment on that. But certainly, if you see something that you want to ask a question about at the end, please feel free. I'm happy to share any details that you might be interested in with regard to the data analysis. So another risk factor is this whole idea. One of Lamont's very early executive orders was around this notion of essential workers. And I do think it is informative for you to know that 45% of the households, again, who responded to the survey, are actually considered essential workers. Again, associated with a risk factor. These are people that typically have to be at work, and certainly early on in the pandemic, lots of questions and concerns about their safety, the availability of PPE, for example, and again, around the possibility of infection by COVID. So we're moving now away from demographic or profiles of households, including possible risks within each of those households, into a couple of questions related to activities. So in other words, when Lamont talked about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, he's talked about specific activities or capacity related to those activities. And we can't make any inferences about what households tell us they're willing to do regarding the reopening of Connecticut and the recovery from COVID unless we have some idea about what those family members, those households did prior to COVID. So there's two questions here. One is, in general, tell us how you and your family spent your time before COVID. And if that's how you spent your time in general, please tell us what you actually did in Deep River. So those activities that were specific to your community. So I put this in all in a table, those two questions together along with the phases. Please note, I did not change the table because at the time we developed the survey and households were responding, we were still anticipating that phase 3 was going to be in August. We now know, and I do have a note in the report that phase 3 actually didn't start until a couple of weeks ago, and phase 2 actually continued July, August, and September. So if you look at preferred activities, this is what families told us they did in a world before COVID. And this is in kind of a descending order. So 90% dined out, approximately 80 shopped. They enjoyed outdoor activities. They traveled, they watched TV, they went to movies and concerts. They enjoyed water activities, went for a drink at the bar, art galleries, gyms or fitnesses, religious services, participation in sports, played video games. So this is a combination of the areas that Lamont identified in each of those 3 phases, as well as activities that we know families would have enjoyed just in spending time together. So the point here being is that now you look at, this is what our household did, and this is what we actually enjoyed and did in Deep River. And you can see there's still very high percentages. So if we dined out, 81% of people dined out in Deep River. If we participated in special events, which that was specific to Deep River, 73% of these households did, and so on. So people, while fewer people said they preferred to shop, more people actually, if they did shop, they shopped in Deep River. So I just want to point out, again, this is not exactly in descending order. It's a little bit different in terms of percentages compared to preferred activities, but what people actually did in Deep River. I just want to point out the asterisk here. So what happened was when we made this specific to Deep River, we actually had an item that combined, or this item of used parks and facilities, and you actually offer skateboarding, baseball, and swimming, and concerts and movies as part of your parks and facilities. And so I split this up. 62% it's associated with outdoor recreation, and this same percentage would be associated with in more the general preferred activity of movies, concerts, and theaters. So I just wanted to point that out. And again, you have very high percentage, 60 or more percentage enjoy the library. The other thing that I think is really important, because you do have a relatively low response rate, meaning the 21%, I think it's important to note here that there is a strong profile of households that replied to this survey that are pretty involved in the community. They attend or participate Region 4 school district events. They volunteer with Deep River organizations, and they participate in town hall meetings, and they also serve on some of your boards and commissions. What is associated, again, I just wanted to indicate this activity and where it fell with Lamont's plan for reopening, so that you could get an idea of how many people were doing these activities before and how they had been identified in terms of priorities related to reopening throughout the summer. So now that we kind of have a baseline, if you will, we asked a question about, in the past 2 months, this is April and May now, what was the impact that COVID had on your household? And again, I've highlighted some things here that I want to draw your attention to. So you have a little bit less than 10% of people, households, that replied and said, no impact. Obviously, this was again early on in the pandemic. You have almost 70% of saying, whoa, we had issues with COVID supplies. No surprise there. As you start to move down, physical well-being, this is general sense. I mean, gyms closed, people who may be engaged in physical activities, in gyms, for example, or other fitness studios, or participated in sports. This is the area that they identified. More than 50% were concerned about their physical well-being. And down here, you can see children and youth playing with friends, moving into this whole area of time alone or socializing and mental health, and youth and children being able to play. There's a range here in what I consider this is all related to mental health, from 52% that expressed an impact regarding time alone or their ability to socialize, the impact on their mental health, and the impact on children for those households that included younger children. Religious services, this was actually an item that was consistent across Chester and Deep River. And again, 20% of the population. And then moving down, this is the impact around loss of income or job. So more than 25% of the households that responded to this survey in Deep River are telling us very early in the pandemic, they were impacted. And as a result, you have things like food insecurity, 15%, ability to pay utilities, some concern about childcare, ability to pay mortgage, and loss of health insurance, all which are incredibly impactful in as far as families being able to meet what many of us would consider to be basic needs. You also had this 30+% that were concerned with online education. And this is going to come up again in the survey. You had a lot more comments about this. And my hypothesis is the reason why it had to do with the timing of the survey. When we were looking at this and asking households to respond, it was about a month to 6 weeks before there needed to be the final plans around what return to school in the fall was going to look like. So moving along, when we asked about the impact, if you answered that there was an impact, we wanted to know how or if you reached out and how successful you were in getting the support that you needed. So as you can see, I highlighted 70% or 20% got in touch with the Connecticut Department of Labor, presumably around unemployment. Interestingly enough, if you go back, well, there were 100 households that said, we have a loss of a job or income, and yet only 70% of those people of those households actually reached out. So again, this is how you can tell the story when you look at the interrelationship between the questions and the tables. The areas here that are in italics, this is between 5 and 10%. So we had some people who did contact healthcare providers or may have qualified for Connecticut Access. We had people who reached out to legislators in the Deep River Town Hall or talked with their bank or credit union. All things that you would expect based on the profile of what we saw in the earlier question. And then fewer around 211, the school district needing to have a conversation with landlords, contacting community mental health, senior center, youth services, soup kitchen, qualifying for the pandemic EBT program, or Connecticut Department of Children and Families. These are all the lower part of the table, less than 5%. But nevertheless, noteworthy across the profile of resources that are available in your community and the fact that there are people who took advantage of this. And then we asked them how successful they thought they were. So we have some families, more than 10%, that said they didn't get the help that they hoped for. They were never successful. And then we have almost 90% who are telling us that sometimes they were successful or always they were successful. And this is almost equal. Obviously, we would really want this to be in the always successful, and we would like more information about the contacts that they did make in which they perceived they were only sometimes successful or they were never successful. And I know from reading more information from the Chester survey, and also just in general, the Connecticut Department of Labor around unemployment has had a lot of issues. And so some of those responses related to sometimes or never could be attributed to the Connecticut Department of Labor. So now as we move along, the first question we want to know is, okay, we're already in phase 1. We're moving into phase 2. We know there's going to be a phase 3. This is part of the plan for reopening and recovery. So just as a household, tell us what your perceived risk is. You know, what is the probability based on your perceived risk that you're even going to engage in any of these activities at the time when they are going to be available. So you have this group that say they have no perceived risk. And this could be the same group that told us up above that COVID has no impact on our household. The vast majority here, over 80%, are telling us right from the beginning, we haven't even talked about activities, that they feel they're in a low or moderate risk. And then you have a little more than 10% that are telling you that they're high risk. So obviously, the higher the risk, the less probability that they're going to, their perceived risk now, the less probability that they're going to engage in reopening activities. So now in question 12, 13, and 14, we actually say, these are the activities that are going to be available or are available to you in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So how likely is it that you're going to participate? So the interesting thing is, 1 was not likely, 2 was somewhat likely, and 3 was very likely. And across all 3 of these questions, the highest rating, this is a weighted average now, was 2.1. So across phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, people in Deep River, households are telling you they are at a maximum only somewhat likely to participate. And the range was from 2.1 down to 1.1, saying we're not likely. So what I did here is I kind of split the difference between 1 and 2. So if we now look through these next 3 questions, the bold, so in phase 1, households were somewhat likely to engage in outdoor recreation, less likely to go to a retail store or to return to work, and so on. They were also, this is now moving into phase 2, telling us they were somewhat likely to engage in personal services, and they were likely to attend outdoor opportunities for arts or entertainment or another event, and to visit the public library. So when I split the difference, it was anything from 2.1 to 1.6, where I said, okay, that leans toward somewhat likely, and anything from 1.1 to 1.5, not so likely, not likely. So at that time, and even going forward, understanding where we are right now with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and some spikes in infection rates and the potential for a surge, this may alter the perception of activities, but nevertheless, the perceived risk or the likelihood of participation, but nevertheless, you can see from these 3 questions, if you were to plan activities in your community or you were to support businesses around reopening, what the priorities are, what people are telling you they are most likely to participate in. That was the point of these 3 questions. So now it seems reasonable to say, well, we know what your perceived risk is. You're giving us some idea about how likely you are to engage in reopening or activities related to reopening. But what is your minimum standard in terms of feeling safe? What do we need to do as a community for you to feel safe participating in those activities? So 50% basically are saying, show me the evidence. And what does that mean? It means masks, hand sanitizer, social distancing, maybe markers, regular cleaning, limits on the numbers of people. All of those things are what we identified or defined as evidence. You have about 10%, and think about people who said no impact or none. 10% that say, I don't need any safety precautions, or if a business tells me they meet the certification for self-report, that's good enough for me. On the other hand, you have a high percentage that are saying, wait a minute, I really feel like I need to know that there's a vaccine or there's testing and contact tracing. This is almost 40% of households in your community are really saying, I need to be very, very confident about what is available to me and members of my family with regard to participation in activities. So now that we've an idea of households, something about perceived risk and safety along with activities, we say, okay, so please tell us how we as a community, Deep River, can best support first your household. In other words, what are the actions that we need to take as a community that's going to support your household? And then we're asking them to tell us what the priority or priority action should be for the community. And so obviously people may perceive that what is going to be a recommended or a priority action to support the recovery of their household could be different than what they might tell you would be the best action or the priority action that they feel would support the recovery of their community. So interestingly enough, in Deep River, these 4 were the same. So the response by these households were, our highest priority for our household is COVID supplies. And and by the way, that's really important to us as a community as well. And there's really little or no difference here. So the 4 actions, COVID supplies, businesses, education, and social services. The order is a little bit different. So, or the weight in terms of whether they felt it more benefited their household or it more benefited the community changed, but those were the 4 actions for both households and communities. So this is going to be really important when I finish the profile and we start to talk about possible next steps for Deep River. So you can see businesses, yes, this would help our household, but whoa, even more important to the community. Education, important to us as a household, really important to the community. Social services, again, important for us, our household, more important to the community. And there were other things. You can read households rated resource lists and tours and trails and public and private partnerships and virtual communities as more supportive for their family or household, while they said grant funding and mutual aid would be more supportive for the community. And some of these things are actions that you can take as a community, initiatives. So we know, for just using this as an example, outdoor activities was preferred. They were somewhat likely. These were activities that many families did, a high percentage did before. So if would be inclined to create opportunities for people to spend time outdoors in Deep River, tours and trails might be one of the things that you could think about. So that's how to integrate the results across questions and make decisions as a community as to what possible next steps might be. And then we just had a couple of questions here about, we wanted them to be willing to share their coping strategies or things that they thought would really help them. And we had 50% saying words of wisdom or giving guidance about things that worked for their family in the early days of the pandemic and that they thought might help or benefit other families. And I analyzed the data. This is qualitative data now. So I had to organize it, excuse me, to identify themes. So I'll just tell you that COVID-19 safety precautions, the importance of connecting with friends and family, sharing ideas for spending time, either alone together or with families, and outdoor recreation activities, and the benefits of spiritual and religious practices were the 5 themes that emerged. And then I just provided details of examples that people included in their comments that would provide guidance to you as a community around those 5 themes. I think it's important to note, I just want to make a point here. One of the reasons for asking households and not individuals to reply is because it does provide a certain level of confidentiality because especially if you're asking sensitive questions related to things like mental health. And so it is noteworthy that there were households that mentioned feelings of sadness and isolation and fear and panic and anxiety and stress and the loss of a loved one. And so I just want to point that out. They talked about their commitment around expressing gratitude and participating in volunteer work or mutual aid and through faith and connection with church. So again, you have opportunities to go into more detail, but those were the 5 themes that emerged. And then we asked a very open-ended question, tell us about things that you want to share that we didn't ask. And the area here, still COVID-19 things about the town, education, and some general comments about the survey. And here I actually used quotes. So the quotes from households talked about the need for caution related to reopening, the importance of safety precautions, and there was a very strong theme that regardless of how much you thought you were communicating, there was a sense from households that they really wanted more communication, more regular updates on infection rates and number of cases. So I'll let you read, at your leisure, some of these comments. I chose comments that reflected the strong themes that emerged. There were some households that said, simply reopen. What are we waiting for? Businesses and the support of businesses was really, really important. And again, this idea of communication. Here's the local businesses. Sometimes they felt that maybe the community should do more. Other times they talked about how much their household was trying to support businesses. Households were very concerned, this was a strong theme, about wellness checks and mutual aid. Are we watching out for our neighbors? There were positive comments. I feel really safe, keep up the good work, help the downtown businesses. It was very heartwarming, I think, and indicative of the time that we did this survey, that there were teachers, that had ideas about what we should do with school. We had families that were making recommendations. We had a number of members of the community that were really concerned about young children with special needs. So, as I said, there's a lot potentially to unpack there, but I have definitely identified the themes and given you quotes to reflect or that best represent the information as part of that theme. Some people said, well, we should have asked different questions, but mostly people were thanking you for this survey. And then finally, Angus has this list, but I think it's also noteworthy, and you should be very proud that 49 out of the families that the households that responded offered additional support. So it was 49 households, 3 were couples, 52 individuals that said they're interested in contributing, virtual focus groups, volunteer for community action, or make a donation. So that concludes my somewhat prepared statements this evening. And I know you have about 10 minutes. So I'll certainly entertain any questions, and then I'll wrap things up in the last 1 or 2 minutes, just if there are questions. And then I'll just wrap things up. I just want to share a little bit about what Chester did in terms of next steps. And Angus and Allison Abramson, who's the executive director of Tri-Town Youth Services, we reviewed this prior to the meeting tonight and had an opportunity to brainstorm a little bit. And so I think I have some guidance around next steps for Deep River based on lessons learned from Chester. So thank you very much.
I'd like to say, Kimberly, thank you very much for all your hard work. You did a wonderful job. And I know I want to compare an apple and orange, but how did our numbers stack up against Chester's? The total number of people that surveyed, total number of people that responded, in the comments. Chester fall amongst the same like we did?
I'm happy to share the Chester report. I use the same template. And, you know, I think Lauren would probably agree to do that. Our response rate was somewhere between 32 and 35%. I knew exactly how many postcards we sent out, and we took into consideration from the assessor's office that maybe we had about 10% of households that were not full-time Chester residents. So that's why I'm giving you a range. It was 32%, and then when we corrected for that 10%, it would have been 35%. You had, in general, the profile around the demographics, including risk factors, I think was pretty similar. I think preferred activities and participation, so households that were already engaged in the Chester community, just like in Deep River, I think that was similar. I think we were a little bit higher maybe around the likelihood of participation, but the profile was very similar. Perceived risk and the expectations around safety precautions, also very similar. When you get into these open-ended questions, I think that education was much stronger, many more comments, and it wasn't even an identified theme in Chester. And I think some of that is related to the timing of the two surveys. The other themes were very similar. The percentages might have been a little bit different. The area, aside from education, I think there were some negative comments, but mostly positive comments about communication in the town. And again, this is a perception of households. This isn't a commentary on, you know, whether you communicated or whether you didn't. These are people saying, whatever you did, we wanted more. And I know, being a resident of Chester, that early on, Lauren was, we had a newsletter, I think it was every day. And then at some point, it went to I think like every other day, maybe Tuesday and Thursday, and then Friday was our regular weekly. So there was a difference in the feedback that the two towns had related to communication. I hope that answered your question. And again, I'm happy to check with Lauren. Our survey and a report, a presentation like this is still, I believe, available on the Chester website.
I think it's pretty clear, based on our conversation on Friday, and then you know, further review of this report, that some folks need better communication. If you look at the need for social services, the actual people that reached out to them. I don't know if they didn't know that it was there, but I think it's certainly
or even reassurance. You know, for some people, it's just reassurance. And the other thing I didn't mention too is that actually the number of households was quite similar. You had a lower response rate, you know, by over 200 households, and Deep River and Chester had a similar number of households and individuals who were willing to volunteer. So if there aren't any pressing questions, and Angus knows how to...
I do have a question.
Okay.
How did people feel about meetings on Zoom? We have like planning and zoning and inland wetlands on Zoom. Were there any questions about how people felt about going to Zoom meetings?
No, and that was in part and no one commented on the fact that we didn't ask that question either, Jane.
Mhm.
But I think some of that is also, again, related to timing and the focus. You know, this was all about impact, reopening and recovery. And so obviously going from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings for many people based on their perceived risk and what they wanted to see for safety precautions, I'm guessing that they would have viewed that favorably. And I'm interpreting that based on the responses that we received related to perceptions of how their perceived risk and what they wanted to see related to safety precautions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I just want to end, I'm being very mindful of the time, and I know a couple of people have to go to another meeting. But many of you may know that Chester ended up forming a long-term recovery task force and setting up about 10 committees as part of that long-term recovery task force. And I actually facilitate or chair one of those 10 committees. And so I can speak from my own experience, not just as a researcher, not just as the person who designed and analyzed the data. I think that this has been very challenging for Chester, and if anybody wants to talk with me in more detail about it, I will be more than happy to share some of the things that that I think, you know, could be positive, but the things that we have really struggled with over the last couple of months. So I want to make a recommendation that I think you already have some standing committees. When you think about those 4 actions, COVID supplies, meaning what do we want to see happen? We want something related to businesses, something related to education, something related to social services, and something related to COVID supplies. And so I understand some of the organization that already exists in Chester, or excuse me, in Deep River, like the River Area Health Department, COVID supplies, the Economic Development Group, businesses, your board with Deep River Elementary, or your representatives in terms of Region 4, education, and your community health committee, social services. So my point here is that rather than creating and trying to create a brand new structure to address those actions, long-term task, I mean, you could have chairs of those committees and representatives of the town, meaning select persons, as part of an umbrella. But my point is that I think it's stronger to use existing committees where there are already relationships and they already have an understanding of your community. And more importantly, please do not forget, you have 49 people, 49 households that you can deploy to support whatever effort you decide with regard to next steps. So,
and that was a terrific discovery, actually. And you know, now that I'm able to find those names in your email, I will, you know, we're going to reach out and take advantage of all the folks that want to volunteer, just like we always do. We take advantage of their generosity, their time, and their efforts, and work this through. And I think, you know, based on our conversation Friday, that's exactly right. I think we have 4 groups that we can get going and get going. So that's what we'll try to do. Kimberly, thank you very much. And I will reach out to you some more for some more feedback, if that's okay with you.
yes, well, thank you very much. And again, I really appreciate being invited to your to your meeting this evening, and I hope you find the information to be helpful in terms of guiding decisions that you'll be making as a community with regard to reopening and recovery from this pandemic. And I wish you all well, and stay safe, be well, and Angus knows how to find me if anybody wants to reach out as a group or as individuals.
Thank you. We will definitely be in touch, and we really appreciate it. And if you would remember to make me host again, then we can.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I just let's see.
Thank you, Kimberly. The next item on the agenda, and we'll talk more about this, and we'll keep this going. But in order to move on to the planning.
Hard to hear, Angus.
Thank you, Jane. We're going to go quickly, if we can, to audience of citizens, because we do have the Board of Finance meeting that starts in about 5 minutes. Thank you, Kim. Good night. Okay. So, in order to get to the Board of Finance, I'm going to forego any audience of citizens. You guys have any? Anybody in the audience have anything?
I think she was very good.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm still digesting the results of this. This review tonight was fantastic, and we have a direction forward now, which is kind of what we've been waiting for with this committee. So this is really
One question, Angus. Could you use something like she was saying existing? Could you use economic development, perhaps?
Jane, that's
for
just what we
plans
talked about.
ahead
We use economic
for businesses.
association. We use our health department already. We use our emergency services group, and we use our social services group, our community health committee. So we do have some foundation already, and we have a great list of volunteers, and we'll probably publish some more. So.
Excuse me, Angus?
Yep.
Do you know who 5-0 is and who Eileen was?
Don't know who Eileen was, but 5-0 I think is Tim Lee. Okay, we get a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Thank you. 7:31. Sorry, guys. Stop the recording. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Let's start our meeting at 7:40. There we are. It is 7:40. I'm calling to order. Regular order.
So, yeah, it's over there.
I'm calling to order regular meeting of the Deep River Board of Finance on October 27th at, we just stated, 7:40. We have four members present, and we are resuming. So there are things to be learned as we move forward. First item on our agenda, as traditional habit, would be the approval of the September, our last meeting in September. If I have a motion to approve the minutes from September of 2020. Thank you. All right, so done. Second item on our agenda would be audience of citizens. And since I see none, and just indicated to me that no one is on Zoom, we've satisfied our audience of citizens. All right, Tommy, you are up next. We have your report in hand. Would you like
Okay, so you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Because I'm having a real,
We can hear you, yes.
yeah, I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
Turn your volume up.
But no, I have it up as much as it will go on my actually cell phone. It's like muffled. It's muffled.
All right.
Okay.
Well, that's because we're all wearing masks.
Okay. Oh, maybe that's it. Okay. So did you all receive the most recent town deposit report dated October 26th? Kathy was supposed to send it out, email it out to you.
She did.
Okay, you've received that. Okay. As you can see, if you're looking at the general fund accounts, we're in good shape. I mean, we have over 5,393,000 in our general fund account. I will say that rates are still going down. So if you look at our Liberty Bank account, which was paying, well, right now it's paying 0.50. It was paying 0.75. So it's gone down 25 basis points. The People's United Bank account actually went down from, went down from 0.20 to 0.15. So a decrease of 5 basis points. And the same thing, the next two Liberty Bank accounts, the municipal sweep money market and the capital non-recurring fund accounts. So those have gone from 0.25 down to 0.20. If you look at where we were last year at this time, if you look at the bottom of the report, you'll see that our total balances are $6,475,970.41. And last year, on October 22nd, we were at $6,112,012.55. So we're actually 364, almost 365,000 more than we were last year at this time. I did make 3 transfers this past month since our last meeting, which was on 9/23. So we made 3 transfers from Liberty Bank to our Citizens Bank General Fund account. One on October 6th for $700,000, one on October 19th for $225,000, and one on October 26th for $600,000. So the total of those 3 transfers is $1,525,000. I will say that our education enhancement money, our grant monies are coming in, this ECS monies. For the fiscal year, the total that we will receive is $1,662,870. We'll be receiving a quarter of that at the end of this month, or $415,717.50. So we can actually add that amount that will be actually going in to our general fund account at the end of the month. The one other thing I wanted to report, the Town Hall Auditorium Restoration Fund account with Essex Savings Bank. I was told it has a balance of $1,560.03. That's now become a dormant account. There's been no activity for several months on that account. So it needs to, we need some sort of transaction, either like deposit $1, take $1 out, because actually if it maintains this dormancy, the state actually could come in and take that money. So I've got to find out who, do you know who is in charge of the auditorium account or the town hall auditorium? Is there a chairperson?
Yes, Carol Jones.
Oh, Carol is? Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to get a hold of Carol and see if we can just do some sort of transaction just so it will come out of that dormant status.
Yep.
So yeah, I think here we are into, pretty close to November, and I think we're in pretty good shape to the end of the year, certainly.
My rule of thumb is we spend $1.5 million a month, which is potentially high. That gets us to November, December, $3 million. We start to get revenues in January. It seems to me we've got adequate cash to get us there. If
Yeah.
the math is correct, if my $3 million is high, that would still leave us about $2 million, a little over $2 million, which is what I believe the surplus to be. So let's say that math works. So, all right, appreciate it, Tom. Anybody have any questions for Tom? Good. All right, thanks, Tom. We'll do it again. All right, now, the next item on our agenda would be recommendations from the selectmen. In my conversation yesterday with Angus Cole, you have not got any particular recommendations you want to put out?
No.
I thought it would go to the budget.
think going through the budget is a good idea, especially if you're gonna go through last year's. I'm not sure when.
No, go for last year's. Well, Angus, no, my answer is no, because no one has last year. Last year being defined as that which ended on June 30th.
Yeah.
You and I met with, the reason I go with no, is you and I met with Kathy yesterday and went over it, and I do not think it is yet worthy of taking the time with this.
Okay.
It needs work. However, with that is a introduction. See if I can agree. We are doing, there will be a surplus from last year.
Yep.
As we get closer to saying it is a good, we're satisfied with the expenditures ending June 30th. We're getting closer on what that surplus will be. Fairly confident that revenue will be in excess of 300,000.
Yeah.
Over budget. More than half of that coming from tax collection. I think that is slightly over three. I think expenses are coming in lower than budgeted. I had been suggesting to you about 250. I'm a little more comfortable saying it is going to be closer to 280 and still being conservative. So I continue, at the end of the year, I said 550 surplus. I remain comfortable with 550 is a good number. I think it is moving up higher than that. So, again, most of that is coming out of revenues. And not to belabor this, we will go over it. I take comfort that most of the surplus coming out of our conservative approach to revenue.
Yep.
And I've said before, I get uncomfortable when our surplus is so high. Number I'm suggesting to you is greater than a bill. So sometimes I get tired.
Well, I think, just to speak to that briefly, I agree with you. It's higher than we would hope, in some ways. But in other ways, the revenue is coming in from tax collection, and most of that was interest and liens and things. So I think, you can't anticipate those coming in any higher than what we did anticipate, I don't think, and be responsible. So, I think we're in good shape, and we'll have it will be a good addition to our surplus. So we can, as we move forward, we might be able to use that for some things, as opposed to just having it in reserve. The only other thing I wanted to talk about, Bud, was the continuation of the conversation regarding the fire truck. I know that you and I spoke at our last meeting about you were going to reach out to the manufacturers. I was going to reach out to the bank. I've got we don't have a promised interest rate, but right now we can get on any loan from anywhere from 5 to 15 years, we can get between 2.5 and 3% interest. So that looks good for us to loan. That's a good interest rate. 2.5 to 3. And that's
Who's that with, Angus?
That's with Dime.
Dime, okay. So,
Yep.
I get my turn. Tim Lee and his brother, who have been talking to manufacturers, sent me the name of a financing firm from the manufacturers, those who sell fire.
Mm-hmm.
I contacted the firm, which is named Community Leasing Partners, and had a very, very pleasant conversation. It is a little bit more intricate than I thought. They were community leasing partners to work with, I keep saying manufacturers, those who make and sell fire engines. And they have special things they do differently with each manufacturer. That's I can leave that conversation. But Angus' point, and you can, if you have nothing to do tonight, when you leave, you can go on their website and they have an estimate. And it goes all the way up for a fire truck, as far as they will go, about 15 years. Like long financing for an asset that lives for a long period of time. I know that in the past, we will all finance over a 5-year period. There's logic to that, but I like taking an asset and financing it over 5. But if you were to go on their website today, plug in that 750 that we'll be using, that would be an annual payment of, I will write, $70,000 a year. With this new knowledge that I gained, that there are leasing firms, you lease it, they call it lease, but you lease the vehicle, you own it again. I found other firms out there on the internet, I have no knowledge of their credibility. I found other firms putting in their estimate, and I found that some of them were coming in, it must be a lower interest rate or higher fronted fees, do not know, but they were coming in closer to 65,000 per year, so 15. So alternative financing, spreading it out, and everyone knows this now. You yes can get a lower payment every year, but you will pay more over the life. You don't need to be the same, but there is an appeal to get a number that fits comfortably into our budget. According to my conversation with community leasing partners, do I have a prepayment if I wish to come out of the lease? If we were to finance our new firehouse on the fifth, if we were to finance new firehouse for 45 years, then I put that new truck in it at a penalty. No was the answer they gave me. And I'm not comfortable with the answer. Seems to be if I'm a banker, I loan you money, I expect to get money back over some period of time. You come out early. We should both share in that downside. But that is the conversation. It is similar to the conversation we've been having other things. So anyhow, financing available. Ironically, when I asked, well, I couldn't get to the interest rate, and they said the same thing. Which is the same rate we get with the refund. That's the part that at this point brings me all the big. And the tax exempt entity, seems to be able to lower interest rate. To dig into all those things as we get closer. So we should be able to use, if we're generating surpluses that we're getting uncomfortable with, we could use some of that surplus as a, lack of a better word, a down payment and bring that payment down lower. But we've got a flexibility, we've got the financing, we've got good interest rate environment, I think we've got some flexibility to fund that rate. I go now and let's proceed. And I'll tell you what, anyone who would like to speak now, when they take the proper time, will so speak. If not, we'll go to the next one.
When you speak, I'd like to be from the top and the fire first, but the fact that they want to
No, they are willing. They are willing. No, they will take it. There's no penalty. There's no payment penalty. Yeah. Yeah.
Roll them into another finance. I'm just uncomfortable with somebody that did. But anyhow.
I think at this point, we've got the foundation for a good plan. And I think I can reach out to the firemen and get some good answers from them as far as what their schedule is, what they want to do. And we can talk about that next week or maybe or next month. I know that, but
Should we?
the idea is to borrow for the fire truck now because we need the fire truck right now. The building is not quite ready to go to the town yet to see if we can finance that. When we go to the town with the firehouse, put this loan into that. So that when we borrow, and I'm making these numbers up, we borrow 3.5 million for the firehouse. We add whatever is left of the loan for the fire truck into that. So that it's all one big 40-year loan as opposed to a 5-year loan plus in addition to a 40-year loan. I think we save We save quite a bit of money over the long haul on that. And we certainly save in the short term. I don't, if it was 650, that's 650, that number hasn't changed, whatever it was, I can't remember it.
I know 750 in last year's budget.
I think we had, I think it was 650.
All right, then 650 is even
Yeah.
better.
That's 650 stuff. But those, that's the foundation of the plan is, and you know, who knows if the town will go for it, but who knows if the town will go for the firehouse. But we need a firehouse. We also need a fire truck. At the same time, just in addition, I have been in contact with one fellow who is, who does the, fire department needs studies for communities. And he's gonna give us some other companies and we'll have some bids on that for you for next time. So that's moving forward. We should have a study done underway. Both of the truck and the firehouse. Absolutely. Yep.
Do you wish to tell the firemen to
I want to see where they are. I don't know what they've done.
I don't think they've done anything.
I don't know. I assumed that they were keeping in touch and keeping things moving, but yeah. That's always ongoing. That is always ongoing. We have a grant writer who we've used in the past. He kind of disappeared for us. We're trying to work, but the people that we hired for zoning enforcement are the people that we hired for our zoning enforcement officers also have grant writing experience and capabilities. They've already written our steep grant for us this year. So we have them in-house, if you will, but we might try to hire someone who just works on firehouse grants, just for that, because our lack of success thus far for that side. Well, we would apply for a full grant and see what we get. I don't know that, I haven't seen where you apply for a fire truck grant, they give you what you ask for, or they give you nothing. Right, yeah. Yep. That is a grant that comes up every year. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Grants are good. We're not talking about the fire department, the whole lot, we're talking about grants.
Nope. Nope. No, we will definitely not. Definitely not. No, we.
Good. So next month we will talk about this.
Mhm.
How we'll do work. Certainly we'll have more comfort on the surplus we generated for the surplus, and hopefully we can fire and possibly identify our funded study.
Mhm.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Nope, thank you.
Shall we go through our budget, current budget through October? Because I think we will identify several things that are going on in town. That will stand our.
Yeah.
Unless any, go. What on budget or?
She did that today. Yep. Connecticut State Library grant is going to take over one of those two. There in there. And that's a pass-through grant. It's an in and out. It'll be easier for us to keep accounts of that.
You're gonna probably have to keep them, they'll probably have to keep them for a certain number of years before you can take them out. 3 years, 5 years.
It's 3 years for the county statement. Actually, teachers start.
And
Yeah,
that's why Lori asked about it. And
Yeah.
Fire equipment, goes to 105, is that, any idea when that one should be coming through? That was for 205,000. Yeah. Yeah, FEMA grants, 46,125, and FEMA grants fire equipment is 46,135.
that 200, yeah, that 205,000. They're announcing those now. I have not seen that Deep River has gotten it yet, but we don't know that. I'm working actually with Christine Palm, who's got some connection with the grant writing, and we're going to try to, not grant writing, but the grant people. And we're trying to get some feedback as to where this is. It's FEMA, but she's somehow knows somebody up there.
There was another, there's a election private grant, and there's also the registration.
Yep, those are two private. Those are two separate grants. One is private, and one is state and federal.
Election private grant is 45 US a year.
Yep.
And then at the bottom of the pool is 47,425 registered.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize you either, that's why we can't that.
I believe, I can't say for certain, but I believe that they are new based on the pandemic. And we've applied for numerous grants to try and fund some of the additional spending that we were making, and then we'll talk about when we get into expenditures.
That's very good. I did not recognize them such as FEMA grant, two FEMA grants. The one right there currently has 0 in its book of fire. I recognize the fire. I know that you and Kathy, you were supported by Kathy, have applied for or are looking at people like that. Why I did. Which would be interesting when we get to.
Yes.
I am.
And that's
I am mainly confused on the second to last, registrar town clerk grant.
That's the second one that Lori just asked about.
That's not the one that the town clerk is 5.
No, no. This is it. This is purely elections driven.
All right.
Yeah.
And we have received 5,000.
So far. No. Yes, and this money will be used to replenish some of that.
All right, now, at the very top of the revenue, we see our tax collection, and current taxes are 44.7, which what Angus and I have been told by the calculate is virtually right where we are last year. So this gives you additional comfort that today tax revenues are we're doing tax collection, see what's becoming.
No. No. Yeah, very good. We have not heard of that yet. I don't think anybody looked that far forward. Yep. No, they haven't been in session. Everything that they're doing is special session. I anticipate if this goes the direction that it seems to be going, that we will probably have something like that again. But, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, and that's a concern. But I don't think the legislature went that far, thinking that far. Absolutely. Yep.
I do want to make a reference, which we will go back to, wishing to look on grants. We have received the state has promised us, with great enthusiasm, that they will meet their obligation to town for the town road grant. We have, we are expected to get 197.9. We have received a 98.9. When we get to expenditures, we will see the expenditure higher.
Yep.
Because there is need that we're, in essence, we heard about prior to receiving. All right, selectmen budget. Remember, we are in the fourth month of the year. We suggest if we were to do everything evenly over the budget, we would have spent about 33% of every line item, leaving in that percent left of that 66. So my guidelines is that anything that is not in that 66, 67% range, it deserves at least a moment to spare back. With that in mind, the first place I would stop is stipend to the administrative assistant, since that was giving to a specific administrative assistant, which is the youth. The second administrative assistant, we see that line item is slightly under my 66%. Angus, you can take over. You've got the assistant working slightly more than you prior. Right?
Yes.
Which we talked about during this transition.
Yep. But also, I think Gina probably worked a little bit extra before she left to try to get things done. But yeah, the intent, and we haven't agreed upon it yet, but it's my intent to move that up from 30 to 35 hours, I think, which is a much more appropriate time slot for that role. At the same time, we will be having a retirement coming soon when we get down to our communications. Jonathan is announced his retirement, so we will be saving there. And when we re-advertise that position, I don't believe that position needs to be a full-time position. So we will cut hours from there, and I think we can kind of swap them out.
Again, we talked about it when you were making your decision. There's no reason that anyone disagrees with you making any adjustments.
Not, at this time, I'm not asking to, no.
Looking our way down, I don't think too much more in the selectmen's budget. We got that grammar. If the current planning and zoning team, if you were to ask them to apply for fire truck, would that be incremental to what the things the planning and zoning, would we play about this plan?
I think we would find that there will be a kind of a there'd be a diagram where there would be a little bit of bleeding over. So we would take some out of here and some out of there. It really depends on the grant, really. If it's directly related to steep grants and planning and things like that, then that would come out of that. If it's something like a fire truck, will probably come a little bit more out of it.
All right, election. Notice that we had the primary in August. We will have another election coming soon. We've got 45% and 6% in that line item left. I suggest we're going to go over in that line item. I do not know what the magnitude. I do not know. I have not talked to them, but are they hiring more people or?
Yes, there are more people. The shorter shifts and more people to fill those shifts in an effort to keep people out of the room. Keep people in the room with a shorter period of time. but we're going to find that that's going to be an interesting number to watch. You'll see the printing expenses is already over. We've put all of the expenses with the PPEs and the additional safety measures that we need to take have all gone into that line for the elections. You know, there's you know, masks and gloves and all that kind of thing, but also we have plexiglass dividers at all the tables. So all of things like that all came out of that cost and will be able to be, you know, it's one of those things. We can't just put it right back into that line. Now that's in those grants that we were just talking about. So there's about $6,000 or $7,000 already there, some of which will be used for this.
So take note of what we're talking about. We're expending the law. We see incremental revenue. Arguably, we could net to and deal with it here, but the way we're dealing with it right now, we recognize revenue and we expend
Right.
it the way
Yeah.
our town has always done.
Well, it's confusing, but I think that it's the way that our accountants are recommending.
The way
it.
we have been doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we have no idea whether there will be referendums or need to call upon any of our elections. So we need to vote this coming year. Again, I think that
Right. I mean, we'll see.
may go on there.
We may have another election 2 months from now with that ethics. There's a referendum on the ballot for an ethics commission. If that is successful, then we will have to have another election 2 months from now to elect the body of that commission. So we'll see some expense there.
And that would be a formal,
Uh,
from 12 to 7.
I imagine it'll be like the Board of Education, 12 to 6 or 12 to 8, whatever that is. Yeah, I imagine that it will. Yeah. I haven't looked that far into it until it happens. Nothing. Yeah. No. I've heard some, but you know, some people are just confused. They don't know what it is, and I think that's probably understandable. It's difficult to read and to understand, and I think some people don't understand the need. Other people can't believe that we don't have one already. So yeah, I haven't gotten any feedback one way or the other, but I'm not. Also, the town was not involved in this. This was private citizens put this together on their own, got the signatures they needed and put it on the ballot. This is not a town driven, although it would have been nice to work cooperatively. We probably could have had a better result, but these folks did this on their own. You did. There you go.
It actually said, first line, Deep River should join with the other 130 towns.
That's not true.
That's what I read it. I'm like, oh, that's a different perspective.
There are 130 towns that have an ethics statement. There are not 130 towns that have an ethics commission.
I can go back and read it. I took it to the.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to comment on that. I haven't gotten home to see the postcard. Well, I can only give you my opinion. I will tell you what the proponent suggested at a selectmen's meeting, that he thinks that the town should have it. Why shouldn't we have it? My own opinion is that it's an effort to restrict me. The people that generated this are people that have stated numerous times that this is a corrupt administration, and this is their effort to try to get reins on it. But that's my opinion, and I don't. Yeah. I do too. I do too. And it's too bad that this group decided that they wanted to do this on their own as opposed to working with the community, with the existing boards and commissions. But it's where it is.
Considering how many people that actually appear via Zoom or physically in the building, how many people do you actually see attending your meeting? We know it very well. But how many people are actually watching the videos later?
Oh, quite a few.
Some numbers to know how many people are actually watching what goes on to get an idea of what we actually do.
Yep. I can't speak to Board of Finance, but I know a lot of people watch the Board of Selectmen. They call all the time about it. Yeah. Well, people do watch them, and they. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with the idea that we should have an ethics statement. In fact, I spoke to the town attorney 2 years ago about that, and she convinced me that Deep River had attempted this once before, and it failed at the ballot. And she said it's not worth your effort to try again. So I backed off. These guys decided that, they decided that we are. Now, the interesting thing about this is this commission cannot be populated by anyone who has sat or sits on a commission. So if John, who is one of the most ethical people I know, wanted to get on that commission, he has to wait 3 years before he can. No one can. Anybody that does any work in town, anybody that has a business in town cannot be on that commission. This is totally slanted towards inviting people who do not participate in town to judge how those that do act. And it's very, very frustrating for me that this is how it's done. It's not a jury of your peers. How do you legislate morality, for crying out loud? There are many, many holes in this that I see. But also, how does the first selectman come out and send a postcard out arguing against this? I just, so, and we'll see where it goes. I fully expect that it will pass, and I fully expect that it will be a burden on the community in the next 2 months while we try to find people to run and what they're going to do, and then an election, another referendum. But oh yeah, the idea, I do not. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, yes, they will be elected just, every 3 years or every 2 years after this, they will be elected. Like I said, I haven't read it thoroughly yet because it has nothing to do with me at this point. It has to do with them. When and if we have to have this election, we'll have the election. That commission will be formed, and they will be able to determine whether or not any of us can continue on our job if they can prove that, to their satisfaction, that we are not acting ethically.
So the ethics, where the
Well, they have a hearing. There's a hearing, and they present their information, their findings to the Board of Selectmen. And I haven't read that through, so I don't know. I mean, it just moves forward. They're either removed or not, depending on the results of the hearing. I think it's, like I say, I think an ethics statement would be sufficient. That's what Chester has. That's what the majority of the towns in the state have, is an ethics statement. But you know, this rolled without any input from the town. This is a result of 5-10 people and their efforts, and they had to get 250 signatures, so they worked pretty hard to get that. They politicked pretty well for it.
Town hall operations, nothing particularly interesting in town hall operations, other than our water seems to be over. Does that not make sense since we did our water in July? Our sewer fees, if you remember, we reduced 57,000, reduced 42, and we paid all of our sewer fees to the public business. Town, and the second, I'm going to go to town clerk. Town clerk, interested in two things. One, town clerk, I think, the assistant salary. If you remember, we had a change in personnel there. In addition, we authorized town clerk to go out and do what is necessary to accomplish our obligation to have to vote. You see that number is low. We had several people come into the department.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I have to talk about that. So we will follow that. We will follow that. And a moment ago, we just saw we received some dollars from the state, which are meant to reimburse these kinds of stuff. The second is that look at all those other line items you have. They're all in the line. Nobody seems to be archive or microwave. And she has her.
Yeah, I saw the wall state licenses. The licenses are July, June or July?
June.
June, okay, so those are, will be spent next year.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably what 100.
Takes it her fees in June. This is the thing. She has to pay that to the state.
Oh, but that's come out of next year's budget.
Oh, I see your point.
Last year.
They collected in June, so they sent it in June. They sent it to
Right, so that's what I'm thinking. Just had a time.
we're financed, we have been paying the auditors. And that's what I want to do. The name of that is that we're paying the auditor. Assessor. You can see the following the assessor. Tax collector as well. You'll note that the tax collector had an assistant, except in the objective review. She said that the family was concerned about the virus, and she resigned.
Right. Yes, that's something we'll discuss as the year progresses. Yeah.
And she has a fee, computer, you know, the computer, one-time annual fee of special services. We do make a lot of copies of this. People out of that one, and the licensing for the computer is
I believe that it's twice a year.
and you'll note that we share a dog run with Essex, which we take once a year, and we put in 6 months, we take 5, 5007. Planning and zoning. If you will note, planning and zoning is virtually unused, but every month since June, we have been talking about it. Angus is going to take over here on why we haven't been.
Well, it's a different answer for both of those. Planning and zoning has, their firm has been sending us their invoices, but they have not been accurate representations of what our agreements have been over the course of these. We've had 3 different agreements over the course of the last months. I just received their invoice today. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm sure it's going to take care of every bit and it will be correct. What you will note too, though, is that the next time you see this report, that enforcement officer salary will not be enforcement officer salary. It will be whatever it was, contract services and zoning, planning and zoning contract services, and it will be considerably higher. So, but it will also be considerably spent at this point. It will be spent by 33%.
And we will go back, this will take back into, this is one of the items we haven't touched on, and some of those dates are in June.
Yes.
May and June, so we will go back. Yes, we will.
Your question about Wetlands Commission is we simply haven't received those time cards yet. CHA. Yeah.
We zeroed out at our last meeting that, or no, the annual meeting, we recommended to the town that it's zeroed out grade is the line item. We had the line of town meeting.
Yep.
I would go to 0.
Yep.
Employee benefits, well, yeah, employee benefits. It was the top line, we budget 302 for insurance, if you're we spent 1 days, 98. I only point that out because we spent so much time thinking about it. Angus and I had a meeting with the auditor. Since employee a part of the insurance, what the auditor wanted to do is recognize in this line that I understand it's up anyway. Pension planning and tree card, we have not spent $2,000 on the pension. I forgot to ask. So, okay, exact number, and this is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know why we haven't made that contribution yet.
Is it a contribution or we pay a fee?
Well, I will take a look at that with Kathy and see. It could very well be if something was just incorrectly coded.
And going to your concept, we should be taking line items that are taking out.
No.
If we pay. She accrue any vacation?
No, she had no vacation accrued. And she might have had a couple of weeks from last year that she didn't use because of the pandemic. And this year's, but she had not saved up a whole bunch. She used it.
We did not owe her anything.
No, we owed her a little bit yeah, I don't have the details on that, but we did pay her a little bit, but not much. She had not saved up as if, like Ray did. For example. It would have come out of right here. Yeah. So it looks like we did not.
Let's talk about Unemployment compensation.
No.
The last 3 years, we've budgeted $100.
Can you go back a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Jonathan's upcoming retirement, there will be some that we will need to spend for him.
We budgeted $24,000.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Can you talk about unemployment compensation?
Sure, we have a few people, mostly the librarians who left work as a result of the pandemic or were laid off. There were no hours. There's nothing. They collected unemployment. We are now contributing towards that. And we'll see that, some of those costs will go up. That cost will continue to accrue.
Anyone who works
Anywhere.
really
Oh,
works
yeah.
hard, gets laid off or something else.
Yep.
We are allocated, and did it a couple years ago.
Yep.
It's an odd.
Yep, and we found that with a couple of our employees where they lost their full-time. They're not employees. Yeah, they're our employees, but they're part-time here. They have other jobs that are full-time and they lost or collected as a result of losing time. And we're paying for that. I am working with the Department of Labor to try and ensure that we're not paying more than we should be. But the Department of Labor is very difficult to get in touch with right now, as some of our citizens will attest to.
Police protection, pretty much right on budget. You will see in the anticipated that we hired, well, it seems to be kind of lower than what we should have. We hired.
Yes. Yeah.
Same is true with you.
Yeah, we needed uniforms. We needed, I think we had a taser that we needed to buy a new taser because we have our third officer now, and we had one taser fail. So we needed to buy a new taser. So I think that most of that is related directly to that.
Funded special police services, as we know, sometimes our forces and guard as a contractor is working. We bill those contractors, and we have been budgeting $30,000 per year. We continue to. Look like we've got third and last week, current year expenses 19. That's a little since remember we budgeted substantial cost for the muster, budget 13, but since the muster did not occur, that 13 will be available.
Yep.
Be unspent. Fire department, well, fire department, they've got an odd. Only if you move my criteria 33 to 66%, to include that they're training. The reason their total budget is lower than my 66% left is we pay the insurance and the incentive plan. What Angus and I have found, here is an item for general conversation. What we have found is some path of giving to their fire department a certain dollar, not itemizing it, letting the fire department take their own budget and allocate that block of money where they should be very close, which will change from year to year. Now, we can certainly deal with this more in our local prep. Anyone have any questions with this?
You know everything else so that people in this town can see where they're going to be stopped.
Great luck. Yeah. In addition to that, the fire department wants to spend it on something we did not break out. Arguably, they could come back to us, tell us that we should make a decision to do our meeting. Would not like to be easier for everyone. There's no doubt that we break it out for people to do. Would it not be more logical to let them just as they see fit? It's only a conversation. And we will find out more about how this happens.
Do the same thing at this day when we run it every 6 months or 12 months to where it is. And that we work. And just so we can spend it. Yeah. And they probably have to have an expense for their accountants.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it would be similar, I would guess it would be something similar to what the Board of Education does. They come with us with an itemized, this is how we're gonna spend our money. And then in the end, all we see is the but it was just,
The reason it's appealing to me is actually that they are using where they see fit, and I think they do a grand job of using it where it sees fit. The way I'm suggesting, I do not know, the fire park budget, they give us a bill and we charge it to that big number. And they give us some reconciliation at the end of the year.
Put this up, any other department that we need to look into. I'm sorry, pardon me, but I'm not gonna do it. If we took out of that, they took $10,000 to develop a program for basketball, and they decided, we're gonna go down and do some equipment for, you know, or to buy something totally different, and I'm perfect with it. That's not what someone has time to come up with, we're going to the extra.
I'm in agreement on all those things.
mhm.
I
Me
agree
too.
with that. I just, both the fire department and the highly functional, uncertainty of where it's heading. I just bring it up there. There is a danger to go everywhere. It's a danger to be exact. Using your example, maybe giving money to the department left, right, let it decide when they want to basketball or camp. We do it in school. They come in and say, here's what we think we're gonna do. They change it for the year. They come back to correctly.
You go through every line and
They spend it as they want
spend
to.
it as they want. And you give them a lump sum.
Give them the authority to do that. You give them the authority to do that, yeah.
And I do not know.
Give an accountant and all that kind of stuff, so nobody can know what the accountant can do.
Yep. It has to be.
It gets back to have to be, because in a way, just let the experts spend money where they need to spend it, that's what we do with education. You know, that might be.
Just an idea.
A thought process to let the firemen, the experts, spend the money the way that they want to, and doing accounting is to their reasons for it, and they, the finance account. That's why they do that account.
Well, they fit within their total budget. Do we really care whether it's a glove or a food?
But we don't have, those representatives of the town, or that when then we refer back to the selectmen, this is what they want. Which is what the board of education here.
We do have the Board of Fire Commissioners who are appointed.
Are they elected?
They're appointed.
No,
No,
elected officials.
no, they are appointed. Right, just like
You appoint various.
Planning and Zoning Commission and other commissions throughout.
It's just like a print next month, when we come in with the final for last year. And what we have done every year since I've been on board, is we we will take this line item we didn't spend and move it to a line item we didn't spend.
Yep.
So, in some, I just wonder if we are too micromanaged. Would the town really be that upset if we said we're giving the fire department $99,600? Here's what they think they're going to do. I think that is important. And at the end of the year, they come back and we spend 66, 99.6. Would we be better off or worse off? So we have less to move things around. But it is just a thought, and since we've run into occasional discussions with the fire department where they spend it on water holes or banquets.
Right. I do think it's worth a conversation. Yeah.
Find out from others.
Yeah.
Fire marshal thinks they right on the budget without excitement. Communications, this is exactly what Angus was talking about. You wouldn't say any more about your system?
No, I think we said it earlier. John is retiring, and I don't think that role at this point requires a full-time person. So I think we'll cut that back probably in half to 15 hours a week. Communications, it's exactly what it says. He does, he assist with writing. Yes, he communicates with business people. He communicates with other selectmen. He just helps out with communications. I envision it having a younger person in there who has more skills with the electronics, maybe with Zoom, maybe with Facebook and websites and things like that, so they can communicate more. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It could provide some relief to Amy who comes to a fire.
Yes.
Because she's doing some work, maybe just
So you can't take it over completely, but can share it.
So, to be determined, I have a school year round licensed jersey short. He would think the mail that happened on the high school together, they own that. He said to me, I mean, 9th Street is going to be closed for traffic tomorrow. I mean, I'm 4 hours away, but I know whether 9th Street's got a traffic jam.
Yeah.
It just, to your point, the two quick communication is down, I can do it. Now, the other is that we have to decide. Jonathan ended up in the communication center salary because he came to us from history, from the communication we had our own. This is a logical thought, but it almost seems that this person will become more of an assistant to selectmen, maybe for citizens review.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good thought. Yeah.
So, civil preparedness. Angus, take civil preparedness. We have a budget of 1,500. We have incurred 9.5, and we keep still going.
Yeah. That's where any expenditure that comes to the town for PPEs, or some of the safety measures we put in here in the town hall and around town at the library, at the other municipal buildings. We put it in here to keep it centralized. I didn't take it out of town buildings or anything like that. We put it in something civil preparedness. And I think we will, unless you all determine you want to see it somewhere else or find another place for it, I think that's the appropriate place for it.
Will some of these costs potentially be reimbursed by the state?
We've applied to FEMA. FEMA withdrew a considerable amount of what they originally offered that they were going to reimburse us for. But the state, our state application is going in Thursday and they will supposedly, OPM will compensate us for what FEMA is not. In the end, we'll see. it's not a considerable amount of money compared to, some of the cities. But it was substantial. It was a good $9,000, $10,000, $12,000.
We have a budget, or we say the town, we're gonna spend this amount of dollars. We have a budget that we control our own expenses. But because of we're overspent several items.
Yeah.
But we're being reimbursed with revenue. So what do we do? Keep negatively expending the budget item?
Well,
Knowing that the rest money's in revenue, it seems that we have obligations to ourselves and our citizens. Not to continue with overspending.
the thing, what I would suggest anyway, is that we start to, let's see, I mean, the applications that we made to FEMA and the application that we're making to OPM, which is called the CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Those two applications take us to June 30th. We need to as soon as we send this in on Thursday, we need to start another application for the fiscal time up until September 30th. So we will start again. So we will see more monies come in than what we see come in right away. The thought that I have is when they come in and we start to create a line for them in revenue, then we go to the town meeting and push this, put that money back into where it came from. So at the end of the, oh, you and me both. This is not at all how I like to do this, but the other thing we can do, which I hadn't thought of, and we don't know what the expenditures are going to be, is create a line and put some money in it. Exactly. That's where we're at. We don't know. They continue to tell us we're going to be reimbursed. So until they say no, we're sorry, the FEMA is already done. But when the state says the same thing, then we'll have to talk about it. So I think that we can either follow the advice on other type expenditures that the auditors have given us that says just keep it at a negative and refund it later, or we can take it on our own to say, okay, these are the revenues. This is where they're going.
And you're right. I've always asked the auditors, we overspend some money. As long as the board of finance is aware of why we're overspending, that's the way we've done business, and we make these line changes at the end of the year. But I just get comfortable and overspend the line, which we told the town we were like, oh,
yeah.
All right. So highway department, we all seem to be doing well there. Although I wish to follow the conversation I initiated a month ago. We have spent over general roads and over town roads, spent in time of year where we spend those $2 left. We're still waiting for reimbursement for the town road.
Yeah, they have assured us that they are. Time will tell. This is, I will say I'm not comfortable with it, but this is the first time that we have done this. We didn't hold the project until the end of the season, or until we got the money. But it's just the way the project's fell in this year, it made sense to do them. So, right. That is tropical storm Ciasis. Well, no, hopefully not. And we have also made an application for that to be reimbursed. Same story.
Logical, we put it in budget for the hurricane. We expect to be reimbursed where we put it right here. Do we keep spending? We tell Angus when he has a snowstorm, spend more of the negative initiatives. Yes, we can.
Right. Needs it.
So maybe as we think about it, maybe we do need to do something to get rid of it.
Well, the interesting thing is you can't see that coming. You don't know it's coming. So where do you put it, and what number do you put on it? So I don't think there's anything incorrect in what we're doing, and it's been supported by our auditors. It's just, it's uncomfortable for me to have these negatives.
And our minute just shows the Board of Finance is aware.
Yeah.
Let's, I'm moving on to page 5, so I can, so, with waste removal and recycling, and the budget there. Notice that we continue to not have, we talked about the recycling salary, we talked about that for some time. We have not found it yet. This is the fine, he's up there this weekend.
He's up there almost, he's up there every day they're open.
The household hazard waste fee, we budgeted 12.6, down to 47. We went that number, and when we budgeted, we said it was going to be like, their expectation is that on budget or off.
I'm not certain, I'm researching whether or not, why that was over 50% at this point.
And the sanitary lifeguards for the mustard is a state.
Yeah.
Health services, everything seems to decline. We have lower value nurses, they charge twice a year, and they let their money. Municipal library, the assistant salary is too high because they're not working as many hours.
Yeah.
And if you remember, the library fee, the transfer fee, we give them back and then the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Park and Rec, I guess I'm gonna have you do it, but I think I could. Let's focus on summer program salary and lifeguard, those two numbers, one of which is negative.
Yeah, I think actually we want to combine all three of those, summer program salaries, life gate guard salary, and summer youth program expenditures. In an effort to keep everyone safe and to provide childcare basically for our residents over the course of the summer, we did open up our summer camps. In order to do so safely, we split into more smaller groups. In order to do that, we hired some additional people. Again, we were told that that was going to be compensated for by FEMA or by OPM. You have to see if that's the case. But I think that the gate guard, lifeguard salary, I think that was just coded incorrectly and should have been put up at the summer program salary. And I'm going over that with Carol and with Kathy to try and get that squared away. Yeah. Yeah. They did not have their suits on. And I was just going to say, we did utilize some of those kids for our town hall safe gate guard too. So.
Well, that's correct. Yeah, some of those kids who were not used to take care of the campers up there.
Yeah.
The Park and Rec actually has a right on budget. They have schoolers there. You can see that they are not running new programs and self-funding programs and keeping up there, and they're all those activities are political subdivision, we have spent almost all of that money. Sure, probably sent to the end of the month. I can send, we budgeted 17 to the seniors. They built the 17, 143, and they sent them that.
No, that was we found that, and actually Lori asked that question earlier. I was talking with Kathy about it this morning, and that was just that was coded wrong. $143.84 was goes to another. It was not coded properly.
on budget. We promised. How many years ago did we meet with them on Saturday morning about how dire straits they were in?
Yeah, it was.
Victoria is wrong. They have a disability that is involved.
And that actually is my question. Angus has met with them recently.
Yeah.
We will eventually someday, the town will eventually take
Oh,
over
yeah.
that park. Should we begin? So that one day we don't stand in front of town, and say, no longer 35, now 250. Is there logic to begin to give them more money so they can push off with what they're doing? A question we deal with.
Oh, according to my last meeting with them, no, not yet, but that is coming. And if you like, we can, certainly the budget time is the right time, but it wouldn't hurt for you and me to have a conversation with Rich and just see what he's thinking about. Yeah. Yeah.
Been sitting there for quite some time. And I just-
No, and it's been,
Theory
and
is coming.
we've been fortunate that it stayed where it has for as long as it has. I mean, it was, gosh, I was just on the board of selectmen, so this is talking about 6 or 8 years ago, and this started happening. So, yeah.
All right, redemption of debt, all is well, redemption of debt, that's a series there. Bringing down to elementary school, I said the elementary school is set to most of them, although that's 73 to 89 is a I don't know if that's the case. And I guess you've got your $15,000 of maintenance and furnishing fundraiser. Are you having to spend the 15 for 2 years?
No, I expect we'll get a bill shortly because we are refurbishing the sinks to, we're refurbishing some of the plumbing so they can be touchless and that kind of stuff. And some of that money will come out of this, but not much.
We intentionally need that.
That's usually 40, and I expect it'll be 40 next year, but we did not need it this year. No, they're not. They don't have their heating system. I'll talk with them about that. They do draw in the heat, not the air conditioning, but for the heating, they're already able to draw from outside of it. So I'm sure that they are going to be doing that. This building is actually the building that's great for that. The new system that we put in here has been fantastic for that.
And the regional four, they're right to land at fire department station, $4,500.
No.
That is a conditional request, but I didn't, I thought that was a new industry. Was that the one that they put in and they said even if we did a new firehouse?
No, that's the laundry.
1 year?
That's the laundry. I don't,
Well, that's the laundry.
that too. Yeah. That was much more expensive. I don't know what this is for off my head. I will look it up and let you know.
Let's stay with the fire department. Equipment. If you remember, they applied for a grant, 200 spoke about it already. We said, but they wanted to, how many?
70. Yeah.
Angus and my encouragement, they did all that stuff. Full board, the fire department, walk and buy that equipment that they needed and make sure that the grant was free.
Yeah.
Hopefully that is. And our revow, we budgeted 40 last year, remember, we budgeted 60, we budgeted 40, the $100,000 contract. We spent about 15 so far. Elementary school roof, budgeted 40, and we spent 40, that's the way I read it, nothing more.
Yeah.
Now, I think you're gonna take over. We budgeted in this year's budget, 10,000, the final payment. For the architect, all the fire department, nothing has been spent. There's still unspent dollars last year. What you think?
Well, I know that he's been doing some work. I'm gonna ask him for the invoice on it. Well, I know he's trying to be a friend to the community, and some of the little things he said hasn't told us for over the years, but we're different guys. So.
And park upgrade, we have not spent any of that. That is what swing sets.
I believe so. I know that Carol had something she wanted to do.
And the rail, I think that's just conversation. There were a lot of things in there that I didn't chat about. The easiest way to do it, that everybody can come up and take them. Anyone have any questions, concerns on the book? The fire department. Here we go. We put that up next month. Live taxes are doing okay. Are we okay meeting publicly?
No, not the local. Not local. Yeah.
Let me just.
Hey.
Which may actually, days ago, may actually get you elected, but,
Yeah.
all right, folks, if, unless we have any further business,